Hi. So I'm recording this session today for one of the incident that happened with me. And that incident is nothing but what you can say. I was giving one interview. So there was one technical evaluation. And in that technical evaluation, that was on the Angular actually. And while giving that or while appearing for that technical evaluation, interviewer asked me one question: how do you do the form validation? And I couldn't do that part. A reason for that is I was working on the React from last 1 year, and I didn't worked on the Angular since last I think 9-10 months. So I don't remember much of the concepts, but I have worked a lot on the Angular. But at that moment I didn't remembered how to do the form validation in the Angular. And I thought that let's revise it. Let's revise the Angular, full Angular. And then I thought that instead of revising alone, why not to record the video of revision? And that's what we are going to do in this video today. A lot of people have approached me personally and they said that you are recording the React video, please do it on the Angular part also. And that's why it will be helpful for them as well. And it would be helpful for me also. So I got rejected from the Angular interview. Why? Because I didn't do a form validation. Let's revise it one by one. All the concepts will revise one by one. Before moving to that part, let me open the VS Code first, and after that we'll do other things. So if you know, for Angular we use one code editor called as VS Code. Let's go there and open the VS Code. So I hope whoever is watching this video or whoever has land on this video by watching the thumbnail, right? I have cleared why I am recording this session. I'm recording this session just to revise the Angular. And first thing we have done, we open the VS Code, and this is nothing but what the VS Code window is. Now, what is VS Code, that we will see in a little time. I hope everything is okay related to the mic settings and the sound settings. Yeah, it seems it's okay. Fine. So let's start with what you can say Angular. So when you talk about the Angular, what do you mean by Angular? Introduction to the Angular docs. Remember that it's a revision kind of thing. So I will try to complete everything in one shot. So when you talk about the Angular is an application design framework and the development platform for creating efficient and sophisticated single page applications. Remember that. It is for the single page applications. A revision, I'm doing it for myself. At the same time, I'm revising your Angular concepts. Well, if you are a first time user and landed on this video, stay with me. It is going to be really helpful. I'm going to do in-depth revision. Okay. Now, what is the Angular? Single page applications. So when you talk about the Angular, remember that we are talking about single page application. Single page applications. That is nothing but what? Or people call it as SPA. SPA. So what are the single page application? What do you mean by single page applications? everything will happen on a one page. If you have contact page, consider that if you have a docs page, community page, then getting started, everything would be on the one page only. But you will feel that you are working with the multi-page applications. I'll give you one example. Click on the getting started, click on the what is Angular, and look at this. Your complete page has not been re-rendered. Only a particular section has been re-rendered. Only particular section has been re-rendered. That is nothing but what the single page application strategy. Well, when you talk about the single page application strategy, it would be helpful in a lot of ways, right? So when you talk about the single page application, everything would be loaded in one page, right? Everything would be loaded in the one page. It is coming with the pros and the cons. Pros is that it's very good for the management. It is a complete client-side solution. Complete client-side solution. Everything is happening on the inside your browser only. And it is refreshing particular section of your page. It is not reloading the page. It is refreshing particular section. A very powerful thing. So if just look at this now. If I click on the try it, just click on the try it. So this much section would be removed and new thing related to the try it would be getting loaded. Click on the try it, and inside the try it, managing data. Can you see? So your left menu and this structure has been same. Content has been changed here. Content has been changed here. Navbar is same. So this thing is called as, what you can say, single page application strategy. Well, a lot of things in the con side, whole page gets loaded or everything gets loaded in the beginning. Means data related to this would be getting loaded, data related to this would be getting loaded, data related to this would be getting loaded. But this can be stopped by something called as lazy loading. Let's talk this thing up, lazy loading at the time of routers. Okay. So there are the pros and there are the cons. Let's not go in that detail. What are the pros of the SPA and what are the cons of the SPA? But I have told you a basic thing. What are the pros and the cons? Whole page get loaded at a time. You need to write a separate code to avoid that thing. And pro is nothing but what? A structure remains same. A data gets changed. There are no server turns. You're not going to the server. Everything is happening in a client only. Now, whenever you talk about the Angular, remember that it is something called as components. So Angular is consisting of something called as components. So when you say the components, what do you mean by the components? So let's revise. What do you mean by component? So I will clear this. Sorry. We can say component. What do you mean by component? Remember that the idea of the component has came from HTML5 web components. The idea of the component has been taken from HTML5 web components. Web components. A web components is a suite of different technologies allowing you to create the reusable elements with their functionality encapsulated away from rest of your code and utilize them in your web apps. Remember that reusability is very important. A web component is a suite of different technologies allowing you to create the reusable custom elements. Now, what do you mean by custom elements? Just right click, inspect. Remember that this is an Angular website. And if you go to the source code, you'll find something called as AIO shell. Now, what is AIO shell? It is not a standard HTML element. the element that you have created or the Angular developers have created, that is the AIO shell. If you go inside the AIO shell, again you will see AIO cookies pop up. This is not a standard HTML element. This has been created by someone. If you see mat side nav container, what is this mat side nav container? Who have created this thing? This is not a standard HTML element. This has been created by the Angular developers. Okay, let's go to the GitHub, and if you can go to the GitHub, let me sign into my account. Okay, just a minute, some process is there, some OTP they have sent. I need to just type in that OTP. It's 230760. Yeah, done. So whenever you say custom components, let me go to one of my repository and just inspect it. Can you see here there is something called as relative time? Is it the HTML5 element? Write it in the comment box. It is not the HTML5 element. This thing has been created by the Git team. See this, I'm inspecting this guy. Can you see a relative time and something like this? So what is this? This is the HTML5 specification web components. So whenever you talk about the web component, you are talking about custom elements, shadow DOM, and the HTML templates. Custom elements, you create your own element, relative time. It's not a HTML5 element. This has been separately created. Then you have shadow DOM. So everything related to this element, can you see there is something called as shadow root, and inside the shadow root something is happening. So whatever is a requirement of this element should happen within this element only. Just for example, I am telling you that is nothing but what the shadow DOM. A set of JavaScript API for attaching the encapsulated shadow DOM tree to an element, which is rendered separately from the main DOM. Now see, whenever you say DOM, there is something called as document object model. So if you want to manage the HTML elements by means of JavaScript, we need to have something called as DOM, document object model. For example, if I go here, inspect it. Now see, there is a H2 over here. I will assign one ID, say ID, and here I can say ABC. Okay, I have assigned one ID called as ABC. Now let me see, this is a DOM manipulation. I can say const AB a document dot get element by ID. We have just assigned one ID called as ABC, right? Hit the enter and just type document dot get element by ID. Yeah, can you see, if I am typing AB, it is pointing to this guy automatically. Can you see, AB is pointing to what? H2 ABC, document object model. Whenever your page gets rendered on the screen, your complete page would be referred by one JavaScript object called as document. Remember that this is a standard JavaScript object which is available in your browser. Whenever page gets loaded into the browser, the whole page is getting referred by this object, which is nothing but what? A document object. And onto that document, if you see here, you said that into the document there is something called as one H1 and to that h1 I have given one custom id called as abc. So document.getElement by id abc, right? Document.getElement by id abc. So you are pointing to this h1. Remember that you have given id. If you see here under the elements, you have given this h2 id abc, so that you can refer to this id abc by means of document.getElement by id, this thing. Okay, remember that. What is a document? Whenever page gets rendered in a browser, whole page is referred by. Can you see now? If you maximize it, you will find complete HTML page. If you maximize it, you will find complete HTML page, and all the elements can be accessed by means of this document object. So when you say Angular or when you say web component, web components manage these elements in little different way. Let's not talk about what is shadow DOM exactly. So we are talking about what are the web components. Web components is nothing but what? Custom elements, shadow DOMs, and the HTML templates. Right? HTML template means more what? Whatever you write inside the template tag. So template tag is also something, what you can say, a new API. The thing will not be getting rendered immediately, but thing would be getting rendered by the JavaScript little later on. If you go to the documentation of the template tag, you will find that the template HTML element is a mechanism for holding HTML that is not to be rendered immediately when page is loaded, but may be instantiated subsequently during the runtime using the JavaScript. So something won't be getting loaded immediately, that would be getting loaded little bit later on by means of the JavaScript. So whenever you talk about the components in the Angular, remember that whenever you talk about the components in the Angular, remember that you are originating to the web components in the HTML5. If you see little code of the component, there is something called as add component. Then there is something called as class, hello world component, and like that. So this thing, if you see, there is a template. So internally it's a HTML5 template. That's what we have seen. So whenever in the Angular you talk about the component, remember that you are pointing to the HTML5. You are pointing to what? HTML5 web component concept. Okay, let's move ahead. So we discussed what is a component, but history component, what is a component which is given to you by HTML5, that's what we have seen. Now what is the Angular component? So whenever you say Angular component, remember that it is a simple, whenever you say Angular component, it is a simple class to which add component has been attached. I will come back to this point very shortly. But you need to know, we are discussing what is Angular. So we have discussed Angular is something, a single page application. Angular development is built on the TypeScript, another programming language. I'll come back to this point little bit later on. So if you see, it's a component based framework, collection of well integrated libraries that covered a wide variety of the features, including the routing, forms management, client server communication, etc. A suite of developer tools to help you to develop, build and test your code. See, component based framework, it provides these features and it provides tools like this. What is Angular? Is a TypeScript based framework. What's a TypeScript? We'll talk about that. So it's a component based. It is a collection of these libraries which will do routing, which will do the form management, which will make a client server communication, etc., etc. A suite of dev tools like building, testing and updating your code. So when you talk about Angular, remember that you are talking about a component based framework. So we discuss what is component, HTML5. Let's forget about that part, but origin of the component is in the HTML5. Okay, now to begin with, first I need to install what you can say Angular on my machine. For that, there is something called as Angular CLI. It is one of the library, or it's a helper utility which will help you in creating what you can say Angular projects. Now see, how do you install? npm install Angular CLI. Well, I already have installed it. And if you see here, just type ng if it is installed or not. You might need to specify a command before moving on. Just say ng -- help. See, I already have installed. Means what I have done exactly, I have installed this command exactly, npm install /g and Angular CLI. I have installed this command, npm install /g Angular CLI, and that's why it is showing something is installed on your machine, ng - help, and it is showing you something is installed on your machine. Correct? Something is installed on your machine. Now I have installed Angular already. Let's create the project. So how do you create the Angular project? If you see here, ng new my app or new my first project. Let's go here and we can say, let me go to the desktop. And I can say mkdir, and I can say ng or ang revision rev. Can you see one folder has been created? Let's go to the ng rev, and now see, command is ng new my first project. Name can be anything, ng new, and I can say a revision project, or revi proj. I can say revision -project, ng new revision -project. Hit the enter. So it will ask you for few things, which is nothing but, would you like to have a routing? I can say yes. Hit the enter. Which CSS framework you need to use, which style sheet format you need to use, I can say CSS. And see, here it is just creating the project. So it would be creating the project shortly. Now it will take a little time, remember that. So Angular CLI we have, and by means of CLI we have created the project. Try to understand what is a CLI. A helper utility which would be helping you at the many situations, like creating the project, adding the source code, testing it, sticking to the industry standards. Who is doing all these things? CLI is doing all these things. Remember that. Without CLI also you can do that thing, right? But CLI is a helper utility. I hope that has been done. Okay, successfully initialize Git also, and a lot of things are happening over here. Now what I would be doing, let me open, can you see inside Angular rev, one folder can be created, a folder has been created, a revision project. So let's open that revision project. Let's go here and the desktop, and let's open this in the VS Code. Remember that, what's a VS Code? VS Code is a code editor, open source code editor. You can download it immediately. Go to the code.visualstudio.com, download the project on your machine, right? As soon as you download, it's open source. it's completely written in the TypeScript, and a lot of other things are there. And you can say a developer's first love is VS Code. A lot of developers, most of them who are in the web development or in the JavaScript development, they prefer VS Code over other editors. It's just normal code editor. What are features and other things? Let's not take it as a part of this revision. We'll just core focus on the Angular. So this page we have seen, we install the Angular CLI. So meaning of npm is nothing but what? Node package manager. Whenever you want to do anything related to the Angular, you need to install the node on your machine. If you go here, node.js, remember that whatever we will do, right, that would be as a, what you can say, that would be considered as a node project. If you look at the project structure, it is kind of node project. If you go to the, it's not a kind of, it's a node project, right? Remember that there is nothing to do with Node.js and the AngularJS or Angular. If you see, the things related to the node are in the dev dependencies, and Angular related things are in the normal dependencies, right? So when we talk about the node project, so what I'm saying, if you want to work with the Angular, you must install node on your machine. So 3 things or 4 things we have discussed. First, you need to have a VS Code. Then you need to have Node.js installed on your machine. And one browser, I will recommend the Chrome, or I'm using a Brave browser. You can use a Brave as well, no problem. So Node should be installed, VS Code needs to be installed, and one browser needs to be installed. Okay, fine. So Node.js, why? Because it is helping Angular developers to stick to the principles. It is helping Angular to stick to the node principles. Like if you want to, now see, the project has been created, and what I wanted to do now, I just want to start that project. Now see, ng, or you can say npm start. So this start is mentioned over here. Now see, Node.js says that whatever you write under the script tag, that would be considered as a scripts for your node project. For example, if you want to run this, can you see, you can write something like this also, something like this, and here I can say ng serve, and here I can say ng serve, anything. But if you want to run this thing, there is a command called as npm run and this guy, npm run and this guy. So internally this command would be getting fired. See here, key, and the value would be the command. Under the script you can write key as a anything, but value would be what you can say, a command. Value, key and value, key and value, key and value, key, value would be standard command, that can be any command. Now remember that we have installed npm install /g Angular CLI. At that time, can you see, invoke the tool on the command line through the ng executable. When executable has been installed on your machine, and that executable can be invoked by means of the ng. So when you say npm start, internally ng serve will happen. You will see that now. I'm doing npm start, hit the enter. Okay, inside that there is one more directory, cd revision project, and then you can say npm start. Can you see, automatically I fired npm start, it has executed which command? ng serve. That's what the script tag is. mapping key to the command, and we call it as v, means node call it as the scripts. Now these dependencies are that dependencies whenever you generate the build, when you want to deploy, these things would be getting bundled during the final deployable. And dev dependencies are the helper utilities for the developer. Dev dependencies are the helper utilities for the developer. So this will help the developer. This won't be part of the final deployable product. In a final deployable product, these things would be loaded. Okay. So we talked about the CLI. Let's move ahead. We started the project. We will come to this point little bit later on. And okay. And here if you see, under the getting started, we have discussed what exactly Angular is. Now if you see here, components we discussed. What do you mean by components? Now, if you go to the project structure, there are a lot of things available over here. tsconfig.spec, tsconfig and tsapp.json. Remember that these three files, 1, 2, 3, are solving the same purpose. It is a TypeScript configuration. What is a TypeScript? I will come back to that point shortly. So when you say tsconfig, this file is a main file, while the spec.json, tsconfig spec and the app.json are referring to this file only. If you see tsconfig app, and if you see extends to this file. Similarly, spec also extends to this file. When you say app, your source code, and when you say spec, you are talking about the unit test cases. So configuration of the non-tests and the configuration of the tests, and this is nothing but what? The total TypeScript configuration. So this file will refer to total TypeScript configuration. This file will refer to the same thing, but some things which are specific to the non-tests. This file will point to the things which will take care of the tests. If you see here, star.spec.ts, star.d.ts, right? Specs you will get to know. Then there is something called as readme.md. Let me close everything first. And when you say readme.md, whenever you upload your project to the GitHub, you know what is a readme.md. At that time, this file would be shown to you in the beginning as a home page. Then there is something called as package.json. We discussed this thing. It's a node skeleton. Whenever you create the project in the Angular, it creates the node project. This is the node project, and the requirements related to the node projects are this: name, version, script, dependencies, dev dependencies. There are other files also, but these things are very important. This is a node file. Node package log.json, whatever files you have uploaded, whatever node modules has been downloaded and what are remaining. So if you want to keep a track of this file, that is nothing but what the log.json file. If you see here, there is one file called as node modules, and remember that this file is getting generated from the dependencies and the dev dependencies. Remember that it will go to the npm.js. So npm.com, it will go to the, just a minute, it will go to npm.js.com. Here it will go, and if you see at Angular, So this is a central place. Can you see? This is a central place from where all the things related to the dependencies and dev dependencies, so it is available at that server. So this is available at that server. So it would be getting downloaded from that a central server, which is nothing but this. And it would be placed, downloaded and placed into the directory called as node_modules. And what has been downloaded, in short, I'm telling you what has been downloaded, what's pending, that track is kept inside this log.json file, right? So far we were discussing things related to the TypeScript and the Node project, but now whatever we will discuss, that is nothing but angular.json. This is typically related to the Angular project. If you see here, the projects, how many projects we have? A Revi project, a revision project. What's the type of the project? Application. Schematics, where is the root? Source root, where exactly source code is placed? Inside the source directory. That's what they have given. What is the prefix? Now if you go inside any of the thing, can you see app-root? If you see in a component, app-root is the selector. So the selector for your component is nothing but what that prefix would be. If you create a new component, app would be getting prefixed over there. That's what the prefix means. So this app and this app is same. Then architect for building this thing, serving this thing. Extract I18N means internationalization for test related, so build related settings, serve related settings, extract I18N internationalization related settings, and the test related settings that are placed over here. So those configurations are there. So when you say build, where exactly a final build would be getting stored, that you are saying here, right? Something like that. So you don't need to touch this part so frequently, but if required only, you can touch build, serve, extract and the test. Otherwise you will not come to this file. For few situations you will come to this file, otherwise you will not touch this file throughout your application development, Angular application development. Okay, then here you have, we discussed this file, git ignore file. What need not to be uploaded to the git has been decided by this file. The editor configuration is created by this editor config file. Now from this, so this file is a part of Angular. Similarly, this file is a part of Angular. If you want to write the global styles, this is the correct place. Then there comes main.ts. I will come back to this point little bit later on, but go to the index.html. Can you see this index.html, and into that there is something called as app root. There is something called as what? App root. So let's go to the browser now, localhost 4200, and hit the enter. And can you see something has been loaded on your machine? So this is the index.html. See, this is the index.html. So first in the index.html gets loaded in the browser. Then there comes main.ts. From the index.html loads main.ts. Main.ts loads something called as app module, which is available in the app module.ts file. This app module loads this component. See very carefully. First index.html would be getting loaded. From the index.html, main.ts would be getting loaded. From the main.ts, app module would be getting loaded, and then app component would be getting loaded. Now if you go to this file, we'll discuss that HTML file, whole thing that you see over here is available inside this. Let's go here. Control A, delete. and let's go here, delete everything, and I can say hello Angular revision, Angular revision. Can you see hello Angular revision, which is true now. So first index.html gets loaded, then main ts gets loaded. Main ts is kind of a main program or main file for you, which says that which module would be getting loaded, app module would be getting loaded. Inside the app module, what is a bootstrapping component, starting component, initial component, beginner component. A name of that component is this app component, right? And this app component is having this UI. Can you see here you have written, the UI has been written in the app component HTML file. So here is app component HTML file, here you are writing this UI. So if you want to provide some CSS kind of stuff, can you see style URLs, you can write a multiple CSS over here, and here you can go and simply say h1, and I can say border colon 1px solid red, and see, can you see border would be getting added automatically. Border would be getting added automatically. So when you say add component, selector, template, URL, styles, another thing, do not forget this thing. First index.html gets loaded, it loads this main file, then main file loads this bootstrapping module. Bootstrapping module is having app component, then component would be having its template and its CSS. And if you see, this app root has been written inside this. Can you see, you created your own element, app root. So this is nothing but the app root. So if you do something like this over here, so this name you need to write here and here, which is same thing. Can you see, which would be the same thing, but there are some rules or there are some conventions you need to follow. That the way you are trying to do over here, app-root, try to stick to these conventions. Well, I hope you have got a project structure. Now we discuss what is a node modules. We discuss a source folder where all the source code related files would be available. If you want to put images or something like that, you can put images inside this. Then this .cs VS Code is a configuration which extensions we would be recommending, and other things are related inside this .vs Code. Then inside the .angular, so these things will presently not required to you. If you see something related to the webpack and something related to the Babel, that things are available over here inside this .angular folder, but you don't require these two folders. Mostly you can neglect that, right? So this is about what you can say project structure, and quite a bit a revision about the project structure. Now when you talk about the Angular, right? When you talk about the Angular, these are the few things you need to remember. Angular is all about components, templates, directives, and the dependency injection. Components, templates, directives, and the dependency injection. To understand the capabilities of the Angular framework, you need to learn about the following thing. What is component? What are the template? What are the directives? And what is the DI? If you learn these things, a lot of things you have covered almost. So let's go to the component. So if interviewer asks you, what do you mean by component? A lot of answers you can give. Well, I would like to clarify one thing over here. I will not focus in this revision on the TypeScript. Whatever required TypeScript we will discuss, because I want to quickly revise the complete Angular. I want to quickly revise the full Angular. That's why I'm keeping a TypeScript related part little bit aside. But I can discuss TypeScript in detail in some other videos. Write it in the comment box. If you want me to create the video on the TypeScript, let's comment and let me know that you are interested more in understanding the TypeScript also. Fine. Now understanding the Angular, in the overview we discussed this thing and we jumped to the something called as, see, these are the 4 fundamentals of the Angular. Let's go to the component. Components are the main building block of the Angular application. Each component consists of HTML template that declares what renders on the page. We discussed that part. So this is a component, and component is having a template, and what needs to be rendered on the page, that has to be decided by the template. A TypeScript class that defines the behavior. If you see, if I remove this thing, it's a pure TypeScript class. It's what? Pure TypeScript class. Export class app component. Pure TypeScript class. This thing is also the concept of TypeScript, and this thing is called as decorator in the TypeScript. Decorator. From whenever your code gets transpiled from the TypeScript to the JavaScript, TypeScript adds some code for this piece of block. TypeScript adds code for this piece of block. Instead of you to write that code again and again, you can consider Angular have created a helper thing for you, and that helper thing will add some boilerplate code at the time of transpilation. That is the decorator is. See, a TypeScript class which defines the behavior, a CSS selector. Remember that this is the CSS selector. By means of this, you can select this element, right? Or you can say DOM selector, or you can say element selector is this, which is nothing but this. Optionally, the CSS style that are applied to the template. So they are talking about this. So whenever you say what is component, if someone asks you, your answer should be it's a TypeScript class attached with at component decorator. To the component decorator there is a selector, there is a template URL. So interviewer will ask you what is a selector? A CSS selector. By means of this you can select this. A template URL. What template means? What needs to be rendered on the screen? Style URLs. If you want to provide some styles that can be written inside this. If you see, this is an array, which means that you can write a multiple styles over here. Right. Now let's go over here. So they have given a lot of details related to the thing. Also they have given some things related to the CLI. Now, how do you create a new component? Remember that what is component? Component is that piece of code, or it's a tag. Can you see? This is the component. Behind the scene, some code would be getting loaded for this thing. Behind the scene, some code would be getting loaded for this thing, and that code definition has been written over here, right? That code definition has been written over here. What it should render, what styles it should provide, all that things are over here. Okay. Now here, if you want to create a new component, so this is the default one, but I want to create one of the new component. See, control and the backtick is the command. Control and the backtick is the command. REV project, and here I can say ng generate. Generate means what? What to generate? I want to generate the component. Ng generate component, and name of the component, and here we can say centered. Now see, centered hyphen h1, centered h1, something like that. If you don't want to create, or if you don't want to write all these things, just remove this, keep only C, remove this, keep only G. So ng gc centered h1, right? Now see, here one folder would be getting created. You can control that behavior also. If you don't want to create the folder, you can say flat hyphen flat, and it will not create a new folder over here. But see, I will show you the default behavior. Ng generate component centered h1, hit the enter, and can you see one folder would be getting created, centered h1, right? And inside this I can go and I can create a div, and inside that h1, and I can say normal h1. So here, if you go to the newly created component, you can copy this app centered h1 and you can write it as a component. That is also okay, app centered h1, right? Now see, app centered h1 is there. Let's close it. Go to the centered h1.html, and here we can say h1, this is centered h1, this is centered h1. Now if you go here, can you see normal h1, and this is centered h1, normal h1. If you go here, this is the normal h1, this is a centered h1. You getting my point, team? Hello, dear learners, stick to the session, revise the session, pause it, rewind it, and again come to this point. So I always say one thing during the training sessions. Remember that learning is always psychosomatic process. What is the learning? Psychosomatic process. So when you say learning, you are talking about a psychosomatic process. What is a psychosomatic process? Which involves both body and mind. Which involves body and mind. Both the things should be available at the time of learning. If you are available by means of mind and your body says that okay, I need to eat something, you will not understand the concept. Well, if you are available with the body, but if your mind is roaming somewhere around, then also you will not learn. Remember that both the things should be available at the time of learning. That's why it's a psychosomatic process. It is a psychosomatic process. Okay. Now normal H1 and centered H1. you created new component. So when you talk about the component, again it's a TypeScript class which is having CSS selector, what to load and how to decorate it, or how to render it, or how to, what you can say, aesthetically make it correct. That are nothing but the CSS. Well, this can be anything, but I told you there is a convention, follow the convention. So component is working, right? So component is working. Now this is about the component. They have said creating the components manually. How do you create? Means you will create the class and you will attach this add component annotation, specifying a component behavior using the CSS selector, right? So one more thing about the component. Now say I will create one more component. I will create one more component, ngGC, I can say ngGC, I can say here, and I can say upper h1, uppercase h1. Okay, now I don't want to create a folder, and inline template is inline styles, hit the enter and you will get to know. Okay, yeah, that's what a revision helps you. I want to create component with the inline style. Just go here and you can say ng -- help, and inside the ng -- help, ng generate, or alias is g, and if you can say okay, Angular CLI inline template, inline style. IS and IT command is correct. IS and IT, what's the error? Just a minute. Just a minute. Angular CLI, I think yeah, that's why revision is important. These things I'm missing. Just a minute. Okay. This thing has been changed. Remember that. So if you want to do this thing in the new version of the CLI, this thing is changed. And instead of that, you need to write a full thing, inline hyphen style is equals to true hyphen hyphen inline template true. Okay, spelling mistake, TMP. And hit the enter. I think this has been changed. This has been changed in the latest versions of the CLI. But in the earlier versions, IT and the IS were working. Yeah, it's good. I learned something new. Inline style true hyphen hyphen inline template true. And if you use hyphen hyphen flat, it will not create. See, if you use hyphen hyphen flat like this, it will not create the folder. It will not create a new folder, but straight away it will create over here. Fine. So let's not use a flat. So upper H1 we have created. Now if you see, this NGGC automatically adds, if you see here, components here also, centered H1 component, upper H1 component. You don't need to modify this file manually. But if you want to delete it, you need to delete these two things manually from here. Right? So in the module also, these two things would be getting added. These two things would be getting added. Okay, now you can go here and you can again go to the upper H1, and if you go here, there is a first let me write it and then I will come back to this thing. Yeah, app centered H1, app upper H1. Can you see, this is a centered H1, this is a upper H1. If you see, presently they are not doing anything, we are not writing any business logic over here. But if you see, there is a significant difference between the centered H1 and this thing. I will show you. Can you see here? Inside this there is something called as template URL. Inside this there is something called as styles URL, and the selector is common, but there is no URL, which means that this is a JavaScript or ES6 interpolation backtick. It's not a single comma, it's a backtick. Below the escape there is a button, a backtick, and inside backtick you are writing the code. P upper H1 works, and here the template for the centered H1 is in the separate HTML file. CSS is in the separate file, but if you see here, this is in here only, here only. So here you can write something like this. So I'm sorry. So here you can say paragraph border 1px solid red. Can you see now here also border is getting added. Inline, you wouldn't be having a separate template, you won't be having a separate style file. It would be in a same page only. That's what the inline, that's the only difference. No other difference is there. Okay. Then we created the component in the different way. Even we have seen inline styles and the inline components, right? Now next step is something called as life cycle hooks. So whenever the component is getting loaded, any of the component, no matter whatever, any of the component is getting loaded, it is having some life cycle. So first thing is a constructor. Then there is something called as ng-on-init. So here constructor, remember that this is a TypeScript class. It's a TypeScript class, and if you want to create an object of this class, first constructor would be getting called. So I can say console.log and constructor called. I can say what? Constructor called. Now apart from the constructor, at the time of different situations, ng-on changes, ng-on-init, ng-do-check, ng-after-content-init, ng-after-content-checked, ng-after-view-init, ng-after-view-checked, and ng-destroy. So these functions would be getting called time to time manner, right? So here if you see, the constructor is there. Now if you go here and right click, and if you see console, can you see here constructor called, which means that this guy has been called. Now first I will write the code and then I will explain. So here we can say on implements, on changes. So here just add implement the on changes, ng on change method. Remember that you are writing function inside that. Then on init, it's the interface on init. On init, you can just say on init. So I will write immediately over here. So it's a TypeScript interface on init. After that ng do check, say do check. After the do check, after content init, see implements after content init, after content checked, after view init, after view checked, on destroy. See, these many things are there, and let's implement all unimplemented interfaces. Ng do check to the ng destroy. I will paste it here. See now, the way I have written console over here, same I can write over here on changes. So just this thing we will call ng on changes, and we'll discuss first. Let me complete the code and then we'll discuss the things. Ng on init, ng do check, ng after content init. Now what do you mean by content, what do you mean by view? That thing also we will discuss. Ng after content checked, after view init, after view checked, and destroy, ng on destroy. See, so constructor is not a life cycle, is not a part of a life cycle. Whenever you create object, whenever Angular will create object of this centered h1 component, at that time this guy would be getting called. But there are some triggers, like when component is added into the DOM, I want event. If component is removed into the DOM, I want event. If component data gets changed, I want event. Now you go over here, refresh it, and can you see first constructor called ng on init, ng do check, ng after content init, ng after content check, ng after view init, ng after view checked, ng do check, ng content check, ng after view checked, do check, after content check, after view checked. So whenever your component is interacting with the browser, so first whenever object is created, that's the constructor, that's not a part of a life cycle. That is not a part of what? Life cycle. But whenever component is added to the DOM, when component added to DOM, this method would be getting called. Whenever component refreshes, a data gets refreshes and components gets re-rendered, at that time do check would be getting called. See, detect and act upon the changes that Angular can't or won't detect on its own, right? Called immediately after ng on changes on every change detection run, and immediately after on init, means immediately after on init this do check would be getting called. So whenever component is getting re-rendered and that has been getting completed, at that time do check would be getting called. So there is a after content init, after content check. See, all the init methods are going to be called only once. So this is going to be called only once, this is going to be called only once, this is going to be called only once. So whenever content of the component is getting initialized, which means that now centered h1 is there, so all the things inside this would be getting, whenever component is getting initialized, so content of the component means this is getting initialized at that time, right? On content, or you can say after content init would be getting called. But there is one trick. If you go over here, if you see ng on init, ng do check, after content init, after content check, after view init, after view check. See, whenever a data of the component would be getting whenever the data of the component, okay, I'm sorry, I mistakenly said that this is not a content, but this is a view data. Now if I go over here and whatever I write over here, so this thing is called as content. So, or if you have a p over here, a p tag over here, and here I can say this is p tag, this is a p tag. So app centered h1, to that you have written the p tag. So this thing is called as content, while the data of the component, now see, this is a component, app centered h1 component, and data of the component is available in the template file. So whatever is the template data, that is called as view. Whatever data is getting added to the component from outside, whatever data is getting added to the component from the outside, that data is called as projected content. In this case you can say just content. Whatever data component belongs, whatever data this component belongs, means the data which is available inside this HTML, is called as view. So if you see here, first the projected content gets initialized, that is getting checked. Checked means what? If there are any changes are there or not. If you want to check that, that is nothing but the checked. Similarly, view init, view checked. And after all that things, do check method is getting called. If you see here, ng on init, do check would be getting called immediately. After that, content init, content checked, view init, view checked. View init and what? View checked. So whenever you say a life cycle, what are the life cycle hooks? If you see, when component is getting added into the DOM, this function would be getting called. So do check would be getting called immediately after ng on init, and this would be getting called after. This would be getting called after the change detection cycle. Whenever Angular runs the change detection, which means that is there any changed, Angular runs the cycles time to time, is there any changed, and after successfully running that cycle, this thing would be getting called. Then we discuss what is content. What is content? Content means what? The data that is getting projected from the outside, this is a content. So once this data would be getting initialized successfully, this would be getting called. If Angular wants to detect the changes, if anything has been changed inside this, Angular runs the cycle, and after successfully running, it calls this function, ng after content checked. View means what? A native component data which is available in a template. After initializing that, ng after view init would be getting called. After running the change detection cycle inside this would be getting called. And ng destroy, whenever component would be getting removed from the memory or from the DOM, ng on destroy would be getting called. Ng on destroy would be getting called. Well, this is about the life cycle they have written over here. If you get any query, you can ask me in the comment box. Now, view encapsulation. So when you talk about the view encapsulation, in the Angular, component styles can be encapsulated within the component's host element so that they don't affect the rest of the application. The component decorator provides the encapsulation. right? Now if you go over here in the body, in the app root, can you see it adds some this weird tag C18 ng content C18, something weird has been getting added over here. This is because of whom? By default, what you can say, the view encapsulation strategy. See now, in the Angular, a component styles because see now, there is a border available. I'm sorry, a border available inside this. Can you see here also? And the border is available inside this here also, if there are the class name conflicts. So how Angular is going to differentiate by means of view encapsulation? In Angular, a component style can be encapsulated within the component's host element so that they don't affect rest of the application. The component decorator provides the encapsulation. The component decorator over here provides encapsulation, and there are different values. Shadow DOM, emulated, this is a default one. The Angular modifies the component CSS selector that they are only applied to the component's view and do not affect the other elements in the application, right? Emulating the shadow DOM behavior. For the more details, you can see something like this. If you see, can you see? So underscore ng host pmm, so this weird has been getting added to the Angular because of this thing. Now here you can say encapsulation. So view encapsulation dot, there are three strategies. Emulated, you do this thing emulated and refresh it, and see things would be like this. If you say none and refresh it, to which component we have made none? Upper H1, and inside this just remove that. Yeah, can you see, to the p tag it adds some ng content uhqc17. Now let me make it none, encapsulation none, and can you see, to the p tag that has been removed over here, means none and the emulated is working actually, and you are inside app user h1. So inside app user h1 you can understand that, so something this weird kind of this is not available to the p because you have made it as none. And there is one more thing is also shadow DOM, right? App root, this, and can you see now, to the h1 shadow root is there, and inside that it has created some styles. Can you see that? So there is something like this h1 and it has created like this, and then it has pointed out something like this, and then p, a shadow root. Remember that if you don't write anything, by default would be the emulated. Default one would be the emulated. That is nothing but adding this thing. What is view encapsulation? What is view encapsulation? In Angular, a component style can be encapsulated within the component's host element so that they don't affect the rest of the application. To avoid the style collision, Angular uses something called as view encapsulation strategy. Getting my point? Hello? Now We'll continue in after 5 minutes. Okay. Now okay, so we discuss about the view encapsulation. Now there is something called as data binding. There is something called as what? Data binding. Let's talk about the data binding now. So when you talk about the data binding, so let's go to the centered h1. Okay, I have written these things over here. Or let's create the new component, or in the app component I will write. Okay, so here, or let's create a new component itself, nggc, and we can say data dtbn, data binding. Hit the enter, and if you see dtbn has been created, dtbn has been automatically added over here, dtbn, and in the app h1, let's go to the here, and let me comment out all these things. Let me remove all these things, and here we can say data bn, app dtbn, okay, and data binding works, you can see over here. Now inside this, let's have, in the data binding components, let's have a div, and inside that I can have input type text, placeholder say name, and I can have input type button, and then value you can say okay. Can you see name and okay? Well, you can apply some flexbox and other styles also. We can say dot container display flex, width 100 VW, viewport width, height 100 VH, viewport height. Okay, and then justify content center, align items center, and to this I can say class is equals to dot cont, or just cont. Can you see at the center of the screen you will find these details. at the center of the screen, you will find these details. Now, if I want to, what you can say, if I want to assign some text inside this like this on the click of this button, how to do that? That's what the component interaction is. That's what the component interaction is. And that's what the data binding is. Now first what I will do, let's close or let's keep this file as it is, component ts, and I can say vl is equals to abc. Now I want to assign, can you see here, value is equals to abc, or whatever I will write, that will come over here as this thing. But I want to assign a variable value. So vl is there, is a variable, and the value is abc. I want to assign that. How do you do that? Either you can write something like this, vl, and can you see vl value is abc. The moment you change this value to something else like this, here also value would be getting changed, right? But here you can just pass the strings. If this is a string, it will work. If this is an object, this will not work, right? So this thing is called as string interpolation, one kind of data binding. Well, another approach is a property binding, right? Another approach, I can say name 1, name 2, is a property binding. So when you talk about the property binding, the HTML property is a value that you need to write it in the rectangular brackets, and then you need to write the variable name vl. Can you see, one and same? Effect is one and same. There is no difference. Value vl, a property binding. So that's what they have written inside this. That's what they have written inside this. It is nothing but what? The property binding. Okay, now see, there is a one life cycle method which is related to this property. Now let me tell you, whenever the property of the component would be getting changed, whenever the property of the component would be getting changed, at that time there is one lifecycle hook that would be getting called, and that is nothing but what? ng on changes. So this would be getting called in the beginning. This would be getting called in the beginning. Also if you can see, there is one parameter called as changes, simple changes. Here it will give you the old value and the new value. Old value and the new value. Here it will give you what? Old value and the new value. So whenever, consider that this is your custom component like upper h1 or something like that, and it is having one property. Whenever that property would be getting changed, one lifecycle method would be getting invoked internally. That is nothing but what? ng on changes. That is nothing but what? ng on changes. That method is nothing but what? ng on changes. Remember that. So that I didn't discuss at the time of lifecycle because we don't have any trigger point. So we have a trigger point over here is a property. So change in property will invoke one lifecycle hook, ng on changes. Okay, now so this is towards the element. So you have a variable and you need to assign a value of that variable to the property, to the element. Now this element is something like that, it is going to generate the event. Now see here, I can say on OK. So this is the function, and this function I want to call on the click of the button. Someone clicked the button. Someone clicked the button. Now see, there is one built-in event Angular has created, click event, and see round brackets, and you need to give a name. You can say on OK. You need to give a name that is nothing but what? On OK. Now if you go over here, just open the inspector console and click on OK, on OK. Okay, just a minute. Okay, I have forgotten the brackets. See here, on OK. And if you go over here, can you see simple button clicked? So interaction with the component, if you see this on click and this thing. So these things are nothing but what? The data binding. So this thing is called as property binding, and this thing is called as event binding. Remember that this is you cannot write anything like this over here, or you cannot write anything like this over here. So here this is a built-in property and this is a built-in event. Click would be the built-in event and value would be the built-in property. Built-in property, built-in event. So if you see this thing, whatever I have discussed so far is a text interpolation, this bracket, then binding, property binding, this property binding, event binding is this, event binding is this. So this is how your event binding, this is how your property binding will work. Property binding to the element. So in the property binding, you can work with the style property also. So here you can say style dot border, and here you can say it's a value. Remember that now you are assigning value 1px solid red, 1px solid. Can you see this is having something, a red border over here. This thing is called as style binding. Similarly, if you have any class, I can say dot blk and background color black and the foreground color or just color white, just color white. And now see, I can say class dot blk. So here you can say true, which means that, can you see true? And here I can say false, which is nothing but false, like this, true and false. Well, this can be by means of one variable also. You can have one variable is blk, by default false, and is blk, this dot is blk, which is nothing but this, is equals to, I will toggle it, whatever present value is there, just toggle that value. See now, and this is blk need to be assigned over here is BLK need to be assigned over here. Can you see now? Added, removed, class is added, class is removed, class is added, class is removed, class is added, class is removed. How? This thing is called as class binding, style binding. All these are the property bindings only, but by means of the properties you can bind to the classes. By means of the property binding you can bind to the particular style elements. In here this is the towards the element. This is what towards the element. What do you mean by that, towards the element? A data you are giving to the elements. Now here if you see, element is producing the event and you are trying to listen to that event. You are trying to listen to what? That event. Now here we have centered H1 and upper H1, right? To the upper H1 or to the centered H1, if you go here in the app component, and here I can say app centered H1, app centered H1, and can you see I can create my own property. I want to create my own property, and here you can say back or BKCL, back color is red. I'm giving that value. See, you are providing value. That's why in the double quotes we are writing a single quotes red, BKCL, and it should be a property. So how do you create this BKCL inside centered H1? So here you can go BKCL, by default black, and see at input, see automatically yeah, can you see this input has been added automatically, because types vscode does that thing internally. So input means what? In the app component, can you see property BKCL is the red. Now this one, and I want to assign, here we can say style dot background color is equals to BKCL. Remember that. So this is a built-in one. So BKCL is your property. Can you see background is red? If you go to the here and you make it as yellow, and can you see the background becomes yellow? So custom property to the custom element. BKCL is not a, so this element is not a HTML element, standard HTML element, nor this property is a standard HTML property. It is your own property. Similarly, now I will go to the uppercase. Well, here also I can write that. I'll go to the uppercase. Now inside uppercase there is a one button, input type is equals to button, value would be login or upper, right? Value would be upper. Now let's first add that app upper h1, app upper h1. Now see, app upper h1 is a custom element. Similarly, app centered h1 is a custom element which is having custom property. Similarly, it can have its own event. You can say upper is a name of event. Name of event can be anything, but be sensible while giving the names. And here we can say, now see, in the upper h1 is going to emit the events. Upper h1 is going to emit the events. So here on the click, so built-in event is click equals to a name of function we need to have, and we can say on upper and console.log upper called, and inside h1 component, inside h1 component, inside h1 component, and here on upper you can give like this. Just refresh it. Okay, so here just remove this one right now. We'll add it little bit later on, and just clean it. And if you see upper, can you see upper called inside h1, which means that this has been called. Now see, you have written this component app upper h1 in an app component. Can you see, you are inside app component HTML. So app component HTML also can receive, say on receive from upper h1, upper h1. So this function I want to call. See, just try to understand what we are trying to do. Just try to understand what we are trying to do. Here app centered h1 is your own element. App centered h1 is your own element. Your own element is having your own property. Now see here, if you go to the data binding, here you can see this is the standard HTML element. Standard HTML element is having standard HTML property called as value. So HTML says that if this is an input, this thing is called as property, value is called as property. Similarly, this is also input type button, and it is having a standard HTML click event. Similarly, Angular says that if you have your own component, this is my own component is having own property. This is my own component. Now own component can have own event. So that event we are trying to write, and that event is represented by event emitter. Event emitter, and it is going to emit string type of data is equals to new event emitter. And see here, at output and name of the event upper. So here you can go, and here you can say upper. This is a custom event, and on the custom event we can write this function. We can write this. Now see, so this function is available in the h1. The minute this guy is going to emit the event, this will receive the event, right? And still this code is not complete. And here you can say emitter.emit, and we can say called with, or you can say just called. And now here you can go. Now see, there is some data. It is emitting some data, which means that it is nothing but this data is of type string, and console.log st. Console.log what? st. Now see, it is emitting the data, and that data, see, this over here internally emitting one event. Along with the event there is a data. That data can be represented by a built-in variable in the Angular called as $event. Remember that this $event is nothing but this called, emit called or something like this. So whatever this is there, if you can see here, at output will represent the custom event. Similarly, your at input will represent the custom property. So here is the custom property. Can you see, this is the custom property. This upper is a custom event. This upper is a custom event represented by the event emitter object. Your custom property will always be event emitter, right? Your custom property will always be event emitter, and that event emitter would be assigned to a function. Now see, in the app component TS, on receive is there. If you see, this event emitter is emitting some string data, which means that whenever you will receive the function, whenever you receive the event here, it will come along with some data, and that data is written inside this $event. Written inside this $event. Now see, click on the upper. Can you see this something has been called? ng-do check, after content checked, after view checked, check related methods are getting called. Check related methods are getting called. So team, I want you to revise this much part first. So we are working over here minimum from last 2 hours, I think, and lot of things we have covered so far. And lot to cover more. So it is not possible to cover everything in the one session. It might take 3-4 sessions at least, or 2-3 sessions at least. But in this session we have covered a bit related to the Angular project. What is Angular? What is DOM? What are the basics? How to create the project? What are the components? What are the view encapsulation strategies? Right? What is the data binding? What are the custom events, custom properties? Till this part we have covered. So in the next video, I will try to revise as many as things, right? So let's meet in the next video. So I want you to revise these many things and ask me your queries in the comment box. If you are new to the channel, you are watching this very first time, you can watch my other videos also, which are on the React part, and few of them on the Java as well. There are some live streams also. So in this channel, what I do, I work on mean stack, MERN stack, Java full stack, Android application development full stack. If you like the channel, you can subscribe to it and you can motivate me by subscribing to the channel. If you have any feedback, requesting you give me the feedback on the chat box, inside the comment box, sorry. Also, please let me know, how did you find this video, especially this video. So reason for recording this video I already have cleared. I have already cleared in the beginning only. Now in this series, lot of other videos are yet to come. So please stay tuned with me. Thank you. Thanks a lot for waiting this long. Thank you. I am stopping the recording. Thank you.